Welcome back to another copywriting Q&A video. I was literally about to head out, but it started raining and I just did my hair. So I was like, you know what? Not today, but it is a great day to film a YouTube video. So here I am. I already have my questions ready. So let's just jump into the first one, which says, could you please share the list of questions we should ask a client? And this is from @express700-3. Now, I just want to say I love their YouTube usernames. They're always great. I feel so boring next to Express 700-3. Like, I feel like I should think of something more futuristic. So I just want to start off by saying that unfortunately, there isn't a list of questions that exists that universally applies to every single client. And I guess we just want to think about that logically. Every product will be different. Every business is going to be different. And essentially, you have to adapt your questionnaire to the client. I would definitely, instead of trying to find shortcuts like this one, where you're just looking for a resource that's going to give you a list that you can blindly follow, I would spend like an hour sitting down and thinking about what kind of questions you would want to ask, or like what information. That's what you should start with. Make a list of the things you need to know about a product or a business in order to be able to write good copy. And then you can make a list of questions that would relate to the things that you want to know. So I think that this is going to do two things for you. One, it's going to give you confidence because you're going to understand why you're asking certain questions and how they're going to help you. So even if a client says to you, why do you need that? You can very confidently say, oh, because A, B, C, and D. That's how it's going to help me write for you. And then also it's going to develop this sense of ownership and independence for you as a freelancer, because I think that following blindly and always looking for resources that guide you like from A to Z is actually putting you in a position where you end up almost like a little baby that's always looking for someone to hold their hand. Now, I'm not saying this to be mean, because I understand that especially at the beginning, it's nice to have as much guidance as possible. But I also think that you kind of need to throw yourself into the deep end as soon as possible. And you obviously want to develop like critical thinking. And the more you think about stuff and the more you learn about stuff, the more wiser you become and experienced you become. So it only makes sense to do that. Now, generally speaking, whenever you're talking to a potential client, or let's say you already agreed to write their copy, you would want to know as much as possible about the product itself, about the business itself, and about the audience. And then also about the process that the audience goes through, or the customer journey from the moment they discover the brand until the moment they actually have it in their hand, and, you know, even further beyond that as they're using the product. Now, the reason for that is that this helps you, first of all, understand it from like every single point of view. And it gives you enough information like internally to produce ideas. I always say this, that the human brain is kind of like a computer. Like the more data you upload, it's kind of like AI, I guess, if we really want to compare it to, but obviously much smarter and deeper. But it's like the more things you have incoming or uploaded onto your hard drive, the more things, the better the quality of your idea output will be, or your output in general. That's why people say, you know, read books and go to school and keep learning, because if you just contain yourself to what you know already and you never expand your skill set or your mindset or your knowledge, you're literally going to be stuck at this level. But if you can also deepen the knowledge that you have. So just by reflecting on it, you can try to connect the dots and, you know, just kind of make new connections with the information that you have. But generally speaking, you want to be, you know, taking in information and kind of using that to your advantage. So that's that. And if you have like all of this information about the business, about the product, about the market, about the audience, then you have all this information within you. So when you're producing ideas, they encompass like this whole vast kind of spectrum of information that you already hold within your hard drive. So yeah, that would be my advice to you. Like, sit down and then think about the questions that you, or the information that you want to know, and then make a list of questions that would go with that. And of course, you can look at some like client avatar examples and stuff like that, or client questionnaires. But then I would back engineer it and kind of understand the reasoning behind it, not just take it blindly and use that every time you're talking to a potential client. Moving on. The next question is from Rachel EDE-OH8HK. What could you send after the call to get the project moving? I mean, for the follow-up. So yeah, this is a great question. Like, imagine you have a great call with a client and, you know, like you talk about everything that needs to be talked about before actually agreeing to, you know, for them to hire you or for you to take the project on. And then you get off the call, and then what? In my opinion, there are two things that you can do. Maybe more than two. If I come up with more ideas, then, you know, forget it that I said two. The first thing is, obviously, if you talked about the monies during the call, and let's say, you know, you agreed to a number and you agreed that it would be paid in advance, or that there's going to be a deposit in place, the first thing that I would do is send them a way to make the payment, or even try to take the payment on the call before you hang up, because this minimizes them kind of changing their mind or whatever. And I think we all tend to change our minds when we're shopping, and especially when the fee is significant or we're not sure about something. Or even sometimes, you know, like I've been walking around TK Maxx. I think in the US, the store is called TJ Maxx, but it's basically a store where you have a lot of things. You have house stuff, you have like art stuff, you have clothing, you have electronics, you have jewelry, like literally everything is in TK Maxx. So I'm walking around and I'll pick something up, and then I'm just like holding it in my hand, thinking about it. And at first, maybe I'm convinced I want it. You know, I'm like, yeah, I really want it. But the longer I walk around with it, the longer I think about it, the more I'm like, you know what? I don't actually need this. Great way to save money, by the way. Just walk around long enough until you change your mind. But if I just, you know, took it, paid there and then, and went home, I probably would have been happy with the purchase. But it's just that, you know, I was walking around, I was like, maybe I don't need it. Although I have to tell you a funny story. I was in a store that's similar to TK Maxx, and they have lots of like house stuff. And I saw a little teddy plant. I don't know if you've ever seen those. It's like a plush toy that looks like a little succulent plant. And I had a similar one at home. So when I saw this one, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to buy it. So it's like, you know, I can put them next to each other and they can be friends. And then I'm like walking around with it. And I'm thinking about it. I'm looking at other things. And then I completely forget myself when I just leave the store. I just walk out with the toy in my hand. The alarms or anything didn't go off, because normally, you know, if you carry something out of the, like if you're shoplifting, I guess that's what the alarms are there for. Although I've never seen a shoplifter get caught. It's always innocent people like me who just walk out with something that has, like, the cashier didn't take the tag off. But anyway, in this case scenario, I was actually shoplifting without even realizing, because, you know, I forget stuff. Like, I'm distracted all the time, so whatever. And I walk out, and like, I walk for like 2 minutes, and then I realize I'm still holding this toy in my hand, and I'm like, oh no, I just stole this. And then obviously I ran back in and I put it back on the shelf, and then I just ran out, so embarrassed. So yeah, when you're talking to a client, you might want to take the payment right away, because it changes that kind of, you know, it changes the chances of them changing their mind, basically, in your favor. And then if you don't do that on the call, and let's say that, you know, you're off the call, you can send that to them right there and then to give them an easy way to pay, like if you didn't do it on the call. And if you're sending the payment link, then ideally you would want to send something else with it, not just like, hey, pay me, but you could just be like, hey, this is the payment link. This is the client questionnaire, and this is blah, blah. And you can say something to encourage them to make the payment as soon as possible. Like, hey, as soon as the payment comes through, I can start working on the market research, for example, or I can start, putting stuff together for the project. And then that's going to make them feel like, okay, the sooner I send the payment, the sooner they'll start working on it, and the sooner I can get that thing done, right? So that's pretty much what I would do. Now, if on the call you didn't agree to like a fee and you didn't have anything solid in place, but you just talked about, and they said, I'll think about it, and you said, I'll think about it or whatever, then obviously you need to be a little bit smarter here, because there's a high chance that it just won't go through. So I would send like a really nice email where you thank them for the time and maybe suggest some ideas that you've had since the call. Like, it's going to have to be super fast, but or sum up something that you talked about during the call, remind them of like what you can do for them and what ideas you have for this, and then send them the fee and the payment link and say, as soon as that's done, we can continue. If you agree that you'll get paid afterwards, then obviously you're not going to be sending the payment link, but you'll just send like the client questionnaire that we talked about in the previous thing, or even set up, give them a calendar where they can book themselves in for another call, or just send them like an email where you give them some dates and ask them if they're able to do that. I hope that answers your question. You definitely want to follow up. A lot of the times, like the clients maybe they'll receive the message, they'll open it, but they're not going to respond right away, or they're not going to make the payment. Keep following up, because the worst that can happen is they'll say no. Now, obviously, don't follow up every 3 hours or something, but maybe, if you have the meeting in the morning, you can send a reminder the next morning. I think you could even do it the same afternoon. If they seemed really sure on the call, then the payment follow-up you can send that same afternoon and be like, hey, just wanted to check in because I'm about to, log off, and just wanted to see if you had any issues with the payment link or whatever. And then if there's no feedback, then, the next day you can follow up, then you can follow up the next day. Like, I wouldn't wait too long before the follow-up emails, because they should ideally just respond to you and say yes or no. They shouldn't keep you in this position where for a week or something, you're following up and they don't answer. I would say like follow up. If you're following up every day, maybe do it like 3 times maximum, and then reach out after like a longer period, not talking about the payment anymore, but just maybe being like, hey, just wanted to see how are things going? Did you already get started on this? Blah, blah. Because sometimes what happens is that they just get busy with other stuff, or something changes in the business and they have to delay a project. Like, projects get pushed back all the time. Now, especially if it's like a bigger business, if it's like just a one person thing and they don't have much else going on, then obviously it probably means that they have some objections. And that's another thing in like your follow-up emails. You could very gently, but you have to do this tastefully, very tastefully. But you can address their objections, whatever you think they may be. So that's my take on that. I used to be scared of following up, to be honest, because I always felt like the person would see me as like super annoying or needy or whatever. I mean, I don't know if needy is the right word, but like, hey, can you please pay me? Or hey, that was a weird voice. But then I realized that there's no place for feeling like uncomfortable with that. In freelancing, you have to follow up and do it until they say no, basically. That's the worst that can happen. Like, you're not going to make anything worse by following up unless your follow-up emails are really silly or just annoying in some way that you come across as really desperate or pushing. like your follow-up email should be very simple and just genuine and come from like a place of, hey, like what's going on, basically. But not in like, I'm worried what's going on, but more like, hey, let me know, just waiting for an answer, basically. So that is my take on that. The next question is from Mohammed Shah Saib 2270. He says, what are you doing nowadays? Copywriting or email marketing? Good question. I think I'm doing both, basically. So right now I work for an email marketing agency where my role is mainly writing the copy for emails and then overseeing some of the designs, and doing some of the strategic planning and account management. So I guess it's a nice mixture. Now, when it comes to copywriting, when I started, I used to think that it was more just about the words, like just I need to use the formulas and follow what I've learned. And then, the copy is going to convert and whatever else. But the older I get and the more time I'm spending, as a copywriter, I realized that actually it's more about, or it has always been about the ideas, and then the way you communicate them is important, but the idea is the main thing. So what I like about email marketing is that it's very cool to be able to come up with like 10 cool ideas per day or something like that, where we can very easily get them into practice and then get them into practice. Does that make sense? Like get them out into the world and then get the feedback. And, I'm the kind of person that gets ideas very fast. I don't know whether that's because of my ADHD or whether it's just, just luck. But yeah, I can sit down and I'll have like a bunch of ideas coming to me very quickly for different campaigns. And then, I'm able to just like, I guess what I'm getting at is that the ideation behind copywriting should always take longer than the actual writing, or maybe the word shouldn't be used here because some people just write slower or struggle to like communicate, verbalize ideas. But I mean, like, you should put more emphasis on the ideation and then the words kind of come out by themselves because you know what you're trying to communicate. And copywriting can also be visual, like visual communication is just as important as verbal communication, especially, not all brands want plain text as much as, and I'm referring to like emails right now or campaigns or whatever. Like some brands might prefer to have a plain text email while other brands will prefer to have a visual email because they like to communicate visually with their audience. That's the kind of brand they are. And a lot of people argue between, which one performs best and blah, blah, blah. But I think that it's really about understanding which one is more suitable for that audience, for that brand, for that situation. And you can always intertwine the two, for a brand that always, and I think this is where a lot of the confusion also comes from. For a brand that always does visual emails or visual campaigns, a plain text campaign is likely to perform better because it's different to what they normally do. And I think it's the other way around for plain text brands as well. If your brand or your client is always using plain text campaigns, and then for one day or whatever you switch up to visual and just make these beautiful campaigns, they will shock them and it'll be something different. And I've seen that over and over again, where every time we do something different, it just like pulls people out of what they're used to with the brand. And that's why they're more likely to react, because it has the shocking factor. So, and it doesn't always mean that, it's just between plain text and visually designed emails or designed campaigns. Sometimes it'll just be like, you can always do plain text, but then you do like a variation of a plain text email that's different, in some way you make it look different. And then it just snaps people out of zombie mode where they're just used to whatever you're sending. I don't know why I even started talking about that, because the question was like, what do you do? And I went on this tantrum. But I think it's valuable information for later on when you're working with clients. All these little bits of pieces of information can be very valuable in conversation and, just make you look a little bit smarter and experienced. So let's see if we can do another question. I haven't planned another one, but we're only at 20 minutes. We have time. So this one's, which CRM do you prefer for email marketing? So I think that Klaviyo is my favorite. And I don't know whether it's my favorite because that's the one I know the best and I'm the most familiar with. But also I've tried other brands like MailChimp and, just a bunch of other ones that are quite popular. And I find that Klaviyo seems to just be the best, like in terms of, like, obviously there are things about Klaviyo that are not ideal and they can get in the way sometimes. But then when you compare the Klaviyo against, MailChimp or like Breville, ConvertKit or whatever, you'll see that still, for me personally, Klaviyo works the best. And the majority of the brands that I work with use Klaviyo. Even if they're, huge brands like 6-7 figures, they still stick with Klaviyo because I think Klaviyo is the leader in the industry. Now, if you have a different opinion on that, let me know, because it's always good to see what other brands there are. Okay, so here's another question from @Armando Gonzalez. Hey there, I have a question. When you write copy, do you also do the design? So I don't do the design. I will sometimes do art direction. So like I said, sometimes I have an idea, and for that copy to make sense, it has to be visually accompanied by something specific. So, I don't know how to, I don't have an example that kind of comes to me right now, but you see this a lot in like advertising campaigns, that the text will match with the visual, whatever is being said, and together the communication and the copy just makes sense. And the image, the visual communication is also part of the copy. So I wouldn't do the design myself. However, I would give instructions to the graphic designer who will take those instructions and, create a campaign. Sometimes I will personally go into our design software and play around with it and stuff, because it's just what it requires. Like, it's hard to communicate ideas sometimes, especially over text, and that could result in the designer not completely getting what I wanted. I'm getting the idea that I wanted to see, and then, there's some kind of a mismatch, but then I can go in and move things about. So I know how to do it, but I don't spend even 10% of my time doing that specifically. I'll spend time getting the ideas across and setting the art direction for campaigns, but I wouldn't be the one that's actually executing on that. Now, I do think that a lot of brands, when they look for a freelancer that can do their emails, for example, in Klaviyo, they will look for a copywriter who can do the graphic design as well, or for a team, so a copywriter and a graphic designer, unless they already have a graphic designer on hand that you can kind of work with. So I do think that it would be a cool idea to kind of dip your toes in that if it's something that you're interested in, to understand, how you would design a basic email, what are the elements, how would you go about it, what kind of software would you use, etc. A lot of people use Canva, a lot of people use Figma and Photoshop. I do think that if you're just getting started, you can comfortably use Canva. I'm familiar with a couple of YouTube channels that teach specifically that, like how to design stuff on Canva and how to export them into emails and stuff, because I've looked it up myself too. So definitely it's something that I would look into if you want to get into email marketing, or find a buddy who is a graphic designer and just do it together. And I would use sites like reallygoodemails.com or mailed.com, where you have lots and lots of examples of emails to understand what they would look like and how to, how to plan out the designs, and then just, try to come up with different ideas of how copy and graphic design work together in that kind of setting. Or even, like I said before, you can back engineer it. So take an email from a well-known brand or a brand that you like, that you find on there, and try to understand, like, okay, how does the art direction play into the copy, and the other way around? Or maybe you'll see that it doesn't and it could have been improved. So these are good things to kind of focus on and back engineer all the time. So I think that's everything. I'm not going to go into more questions because this is enough. It's more than enough. Plus, I see that it's getting sunny outside, which means that I might be able to actually pop out and get the things that I needed to get, because hopefully it's not raining anymore. So thank you very much for sticking around, for liking, for subscribing, for commenting, and just supporting the channel. Have a beautiful Saturday, or whatever day of the week you're watching this video, and I will see you maybe tomorrow.